Good morning, Mount Olive Church and friends of Mount Olive Church. Happy Saturday to you. Hope you had a good week and your Saturday is going good so far. Let me share my screen with you. You're going to do a devotion today on Pastor TJ's message from last Sunday. And so I'm going to look at the part that kind of stuck with me the most. Titled it A Great Debt, and then added a subtitle later, Forgiveness Isn't Free. So we'll go to Matthew chapter 18, which is kind of where we were at there Sunday. Before we get into that, I found this great picture of a judge here, a little clip art on the internet. But the story goes, and I can't remember where I heard this at, but the story goes that a judge was in traffic court one day, and then his daughter comes in and had been speeding. And so I can't remember the exact speed she had went over, but she had something like $100 fine. And so the judge is in front of everybody. And so he has to find her guilty because she was obviously guilty. And so he bangs his gavel and finds her guilty to pay the $100 fine. He's got his robe on there, the nice, big, huge judge robe. And so he finds her guilty, bangs the gavel. And as soon as he does, he takes the robe off, gets down from the stand, walks around, and goes and stands beside his daughter, pulls $100 out, and pays the fine for her. So as the judge, he had no choice but to find his daughter guilty because she was wrong. But as her father, he went down and paid the price for his daughter to go free. And so that's a great picture. I love that story. I can't remember where I heard that first. I love that story. It's a great picture of what God is like for us, right? He has to find us guilty. We've all sinned and come short of the glory of God. But the good father that he is comes down and he's paid the price for us if we'll accept it. So Matthew chapter 18 here, this is where we were at last Sunday, and pick up here in verse 23. Therefore is the kingdom of heaven likened to a certain king. So telling a parable, Jesus is telling a parable here to kind of describe this, likened to a certain king, which would take account of his servants. And when he had begun to reckon, one was brought unto him which owed him 10,000 talents. A little more on that later. A lot of money. I can't remember the exact amount of money. It was in the hundreds of millions, I believe, that if that were put towards today's money, but the servant owed the king. But in verse 25, but for as much as he had not to pay, his Lord commanded him to be sold, his wife, his children, and all that he had, so that the payment for that debt was everything, right? He was going to lose everything, and payment to be made. Verse 26, the servant therefore fell down and worshipped him, saying, Lord, have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. So he's asking for forgiveness, right? Verse 27, and the Lord of that servant was moved with compassion and loosed him and forgave him the debt. Now, if you go a little further in this story, that servant kind of falls apart, right? As we do sometimes. But I want to focus on this part of the story for right now, the servant being forgiven of his debt. And so, just kind of simply here, a great debt, this servant had this great debt. And so TJ did a great job on Sunday. I think he gave somebody there one of the younger people there $100. And he said, I'll let them borrow it. And then, a few weeks later, she comes back to me and says, I can't repay you the debt, can't repay you the $100. And he says, nah, you know what? That's okay. It's no big deal. You can keep it. And so the point that kind of hit me, kind of the idea for this whole thing was, no matter what, somebody has to pay, right? In that scenario, the young lady comes off without having to pay anything, but TJ lost $100. Somebody has to pay when it comes to forgiving debt. And so, my thought is, and it's, I guess we've known this our whole lives, those of us that have grown up in church, that Jesus paid the debt for us, but it really hit me that somebody had to pay that debt. Jesus stepped up and paid it for me so that I wouldn't have to, and you also. So I can't remember the exact amount of money that it translated to, but this really stuck with me too. It was 200,000 years of debt that servant owed if you took a yearly wage, I believe is what was said there. And so sometimes we skim through that part of the story, but that's a lot of debt. Something kind of hit me there. The king absorbs that amount of debt. When he forgives him, it was as if it hadn't happened before, or it hadn't happened. And so one thought that kind of hits me as we're talking there is, how had the servant got into so much debt? How did he get so far behind that he owed this king millions and millions and millions of dollars, 200,000 years worth of debt? What did he do to get to that point? Of course, we're not told, but it makes you think a little bit. How many bad decisions did it take for him to get to that point? And so we're speaking of sin here. How many bad decisions in my life did it take for me to get to the point that I had no choice but to fall on my knees and ask the Lord to save me? I think some of us, we get to that point quicker than others. But it's a great debt that is owed, and I'm thankful that Jesus paid that for me. But as many bad decisions as that servant made to owe that much money, only one decision could get him out of it. He couldn't decide to be good enough to pay off 200,000 years of debt in the same way that we can't decide to be good enough to pay off our sin debt. Only one decision can get him out of it, and that's falling down and worshiping the King and begging for forgiveness. Now, again, this servant does fall apart later. He goes and grabs his fellow servant by the coat there, and he gets mad at him over much less. But I want to focus on the fact that the one decision that could get this servant out of that debt was to fall down and worship the King and to beg his forgiveness. The same that the only way we can get out of our sin debt is to fall down and worship our King Jesus and beg forgiveness. End here with this old song here, lyrics just a little bit. Jesus paid. This has kind of been in my mind all week long. Jesus paid it all to him I owe. Jesus paid it all on that cross. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. Isn't that good? Jesus paid it all for us. All we have to do is accept it, and then we will be saved and forgiven of our sins. So hopefully you got something out of that on this Saturday. Have a great rest of your weekend. Join us tomorrow for University Sunday. Please come support those UVA-Y students that'll be there. Hopefully we're packed to the gills. Wear your red and black and gray UVA-Y's colors to support them. Love you guys. Have a great rest of your weekend.